he's assuming in this kind of might is right kind of logic that he has, that Putin will win in that encounter. And all he's counting on, probably wrongly, is that Putin will, in his dominance, show a modicum of generosity.
Roger, thank you for speaking to us on The World in 10. You've written that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are trying to set up Volodymyr Zelensky as the fall guy for their peace deal that they are negotiating in many ways over his head. How would this peace deal that is rumoured, reported, proposed, oust Zelensky?
Well, to put it really simply, it involves a land for peace settlement, which means Zelensky or the Zelensky administration surrendering Crimea, or at least a big chunk of Crimea. And that is, we think, unacceptable for much of the Ukrainian electorate. We're not sure because he hasn't faced an election for some time. And so the closer we come to this becoming a reality, the shakier Zelensky's position becomes, because he has to expose it to what his people really think. And it could, and he might fear that it will show him to be illegitimate. That's to say, a majority of Ukrainians may actually be ready to cede big chunks of Crimea to Russia. And we know also from Ukrainian party politics that things are shifting. There's a chap, his predecessor called Pyotr Poroshenko, predecessor as prime minister, and essentially an opposition leader now. Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv. There are quite a lot of people coming out in public expressing the need to shift from a war leader to a civilian leader, whoever that might be.
And presumably within that then there's the idea that Zelensky would be blamed for this deal, which seems to be being forced on him from above. Do you think there's a way in which he could survive this deal if it's agreed, where Ukrainians think, oh, well, actually Zelensky has been trying to fight against this deal and it's been forced on him, we can't blame him for that? Or do you think he will be taking the fall for it amongst the Ukrainian people?
Yes, I mean, when I say taking the fall, I don't actually mean offering himself up to the Ukrainians themselves to allow them to express their displeasure at him. I meant really that Zelensky is a fall guy in the sense of a mafia movie. That's to say that every deal has to have an explicit loser. Every deal is a zero-sum game. And that was how Trump was approaching Zelensky, that Zelensky has to come out of this as a loser, otherwise Trump hasn't won. And this, in any case, is Putin's position, because Putin is, in effect, demanding the surrender, the capitulation of Ukraine, which is, a win-lose situation. Win Putin, lose Zelensky.
And I think it's quite clear why Putin would want Zelensky to go, given that Ukraine is his enemy, that he would probably want a destabilised political system in Ukraine. Why does Trump want to get rid of Zelensky, do you think?
Well, it's something to do with resetting Russian and American relations. I think Trump's vision sees China as the major problem, challenge facing the United States, and Ukraine as a distraction. He sees one way of weakening China as weakening the alliance between Russia and China. Russia's dependence on China is partly linked to the war against Ukraine. So, so all those things, you may say that sum doesn't really add up, but it does, it seems, in the Trump world.
Do you think this deal is aimed at getting rid of Zelensky, or is he just sort of collateral damage for this broader deal between Trump and Putin?
Well, we will see. What's still to play out is, well, the Trump ambition at the moment is to get Zelensky and Putin to meet face to face, and see kind of what happens next. And as Trump says that Zelensky has no cards, and that Putin has all the cards, that's to say he has in his possession a big chunk of Ukrainian territory, then he's assuming in this kind of might is right kind of logic that he has, that Putin will win in that encounter. And all he's counting on, probably wrongly, is that Putin will, in his dominance, show a modicum of generosity. But it all boils down to Zelensky having to go. And it might be that Zelensky has already reached that conclusion himself. The backstory of this goes back some months ago when his head of the Ukrainian army, Zaluzhny, who's currently ambassador to London for Ukraine, told a magazine that he considered there was a stalemate between Russia and Ukraine. And Zelensky was furious about this, hence his removal from that job. And he was furious about this job because about the notion of a stalemate, because the notion of a stalemate leads inevitably to direct talks between two counterparts, and Zelensky wasn't ready for it. And now time has moved on, and Zelensky is in essence, the closer he comes to some kind of direct negotiations with Putin, Zelensky is in essence admitting that his time is reaching a close.
And you've written about how perhaps Zelensky or European allies have played their cards wrong in avoiding this deal. Do you think there was a way to avoid the setup of this deal as it seems to be? I mean, could Zelensky have taken talks at a different time? Could European allies have stepped in or stepped up in a bigger way to avoid this? Or do you think that Trump and Putin would have reached this settlement one way or the other?
I don't think there was ever anything inevitable about the way that Trump just stormed his way towards some kind of deal. It was based on this misconception that actually shapes the whole of his worldview, you know, that politics is solved by a sequence of deals. And the peace, and, you know, peace science isn't a very developed area, but it at least has reached the conclusion, if you look at any number of conflicts, Good Friday Agreement or whatever, that there has to be pre-negotiations before you start talking peace. You have to work out what the other side wants, what the other side is willing to give, and you have to, and both sides have to be convinced that negotiation is better than continuing to fight. And and Trump just brushed aside that phase, that kind of pedagogic phase that happens in any emerging peace process. And as a result, everyone feels cheated.
Over the weekend, we saw Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump meeting in the Vatican, this sort of quite amazing picture of them on these tiny chairs in this huge basilica. Quite the setting for a diplomatic meeting. Do you think that changed anything at all?
Well, in a way it did. In the way that Macron was quite heavily involved in that particular encounter in Rome. And one of the things that Trump has done has pushed Europe aside, and Europe, which is going to be essential in the unfolding of this peace agreement, if and when it comes, has felt irrelevant. And but this may, what it may have done is made European players, and I don't say European Union, I say European, so Britain as well, tighter allies of Zelensky for the next phase, because somebody has to speak for Zelensky when it comes to the wire, and Europe has to do that.
And if this deal does mean that Zelensky has to go, decides to go, obviously for no country would you want outside powers to be dictating, influencing who your leadership is. That is probably a sign of a position of weakness. But would it enhance or would it only weaken Ukraine's position in terms of negotiating with Trump, in terms of negotiating with Putin, if Zelensky was to decide, okay, he clearly has something against me, I'm not the man for this job anymore, actually my country would be better served by someone else? Is there a world in which that strengthens Ukraine or not?
Well, it depends who replaces Zelensky, but I mean, first of all, it has to be Zelensky's decision. It should no more be forced by Putin than by Trump than by the European Union. That's not the way it works. And what should ideally happen is that the current system of martial law in Ukraine ends, and then some form of election is held. And that's the moment when, if we're going to stay true to the principle that Ukraine is a democratic country whose values we embrace, if that's true, then that's the moment when Zelensky can make his own decision whether he thinks he's got a strong popular legitimacy and then goes for it, or he doesn't. There are different factors in that decision. One is, does he still command the loyalty of the army? And this is, a big question. Does he command the loyalty of the intelligence services? And does he feel capable of leading Ukraine into a period of reconstruction and rebuilding, even though the country is wounded? And those are the three criteria that he will have to consider, apart from the popular will, whether he should continue or not.
Roger Boys, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you too.